Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of You Opt to Know, the Opinion Section's podcast. I'm your co-producer and assistant editorial editor, Michael Sessa. I'm joined by our business columnist, Daniel Strauss.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Cool. So tonight we're going to talk about Good Uncle and their unique business model, as well as the plans they have for the future of food in Syracuse. So you write columns about business for us. What strikes you as different about the way Good Uncle does business?
That's a really good question. So I think there's a lot of food delivery startups like Grubhub, DoorDash, Postmates, Uber Eats, and basically what all these companies have in common is that they're like the intermediary between the restaurants and the end customers. So last mile delivery is basically where Good Uncle and these companies operate. So it's essentially the last mile between getting any sort of online order, any sort of package or delivery to the customer. So what's unique about Good Uncle is they've essentially, with their new menu, have cut out the intermediary. So they no longer right now are working with partner restaurants. They do plan to in the future. But what's interesting to me is they have way more quality control because they're actually doing the cooking. So Grubhub has no control over quality. They're simply just having the drivers pick up the food from the restaurants, bring it to the end customer. But Good Uncle exerts total control over the system. So whatever the restaurants are that they partner with, the recipes, how it's being cooked, where it's being cooked, and when it's being cooked now with the new menu. So that's what's interesting to me about kind of their newer business model in comparison to things like Grubhub and DoorDash.
So you got to talk to Good Uncle's CEO,
Yeah.
And he had said that it wasn't necessarily a hit when they made those changes.
Yeah, so that was actually interesting. So I initially was interested in the story because I thought it was going to be a lot of, people kind of saying, I don't like the food and the ratings were going down, because a lot of people love that they could get Joe's Pizzas, Sticky Tenders, the burritos, the sandwiches, this New York style food delivered right to the door. So when they did make the transition over to this new menu that was kind of being, catered by them, I figured it would be, a big hit to their business. But conversely, when I talked to Wiley, he said that, actually at first, they saw a little bit of dip in their ratings because they were transitioning to the new model. They saw some people that, had initially used the service that didn't like the new kind of platform. But people that hadn't used the service before apparently had really positive feedback, really positive reviews. And now, according to Wiley, the ratings are higher than ever. So I think that all it really comes down to for Good Uncle is execution. So they have this really new innovative menu. So it'll be really telling to see when they bring on partners like Good Sticky Tenders, Joe's Pizza. They will be back on the platform in the fall, he said, fall of 2019. So they are going to be using this new kind of cooking style for this. So cooking, the last section of the kind of the cooking process will happen in the truck. So it'll be really telling to see if they can still control quality with recipes that aren't their own.
So are there any other changes he talked about?
That was the main thing, was kind of the made for delivery restaurant menu, because like he talked about, food made in restaurants is not made for delivery. It's made to be consumed very shortly after it's cooked. So ordering food from a restaurant isn't really the optimal customer experience, which is a really great point that he made. So he wanted to create a menu with his team that was basically made to be partially cooked on the way to you. So there's very few companies that are doing something similar. The only other company that does it is a company called Zoom Pizza, which basically operates a fleet of autonomous trucks. Or no, the trucks aren't autonomous, but in the back of the trucks there's autonomous robots that are helping to repair pizzas. That's awesome. So they only do a fleet of pizza trucks right now. But they're basically kind of positioning themselves as the company that's going to be able to provide, autonomous, I guess you could say an autonomous workforce for food delivery. So they could expand to many other areas. But that's really the biggest thing. And then I think for Good Uncle's business in particular, Wiley did talk about wanting to be the fastest growing restaurant chain in the United States, which just seems really ambitious. So I would imagine the next couple of months we'll probably see some big announcements from the company, maybe a big fundraising round. They've only raised about $2.2 million so far, but if they want to expand to a couple hundred locations, they're going to need a lot of money to do that, especially because they outfit their own custom trucks. They have this big infrastructure that they need to provide. And then they are hiring pretty aggressively. So they've hired some Michelin star chefs, they've hired some food scientists and stuff, so definitely going to need a lot of capital to expand, so we'll see.
Do you think they can get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the business has a ton of upside, but like I said, I really think for them it comes down to execution, because they have to, it is a great thing to be able to as a company, control the quality from end to end, but that's also a lot of responsibility. So, like I said, some people that did have the service prior to the menu change, they didn't like the food as much because their favorites were gone. And also, Good Uncle was trying this new model, so the quality probably wasn't as high. So I think that for them, it's really a big thing on execution. They have to really perfect the process of cooking the food in the truck, or else I do think when they do launch at scale, it could be kind of very sloppy if it's not done really well.
Cool. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Stay tuned for next week's edition of the podcast. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can hit us up at opinion@thedailyOrange.com or send us a letter for the editor. We'll talk to you next week.